The British writer Aldous Huxley once said, "To travel is to discover that everybody is wrong. The philosophies, the civilizations which seem, at a distance, so superior to those at home, all prove, on a close inspection, to be, in their own way, just as hopelessly imperfect." With these words, he was describing a sensation that is very common for travelers. All of us, when we leave home behind, we imagine a different place that perfectly corresponds to our stereotype, and it is free from all the everyday problems of our boring homes. The truth, however, is that those places often differ a lot from the idealized image that we picture in our mind, and they reveal themselves to be, in the end, full of imperfections, just like the home we were trying to escape from. And yet, while we travel, we might discover that those imperfections are rich, that they are interesting, and that they might reveal a picture that is much deeper and more complex than the one we imagined before. And in the end, we might get used to those imperfections, we might learn to appreciate them, and we might even fall in love with them. And the result might be a shock.
Coffee time with the volunteers.
Castle culture shock.
Welcome back to the new episode of Coffee Time with the Volunteers, the podcast in which we try to answer your questions or to tell you something about how we live and do activities here in Sighişoara with the associations AUM and Chevos. We are the volunteers. I'm Stefano from Italy.
I'm Olena from Ukraine.
And I'm Octave from France.
And this episode is called Castle Culture Shock, and we are going to talk about culture shock.
So guys, what comes to your mind when you hear a phrase culture shock? Octave.
When I hear for the first time the sentence culture shock, it reminds me most of the time of adventure, experience, which includes, of course, difficulties, sharing, and leaving the comfort zone.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. What about you, Stefano?
Yeah, for me, when I hear the expression culture shock, I think of like this sensation of surprise, I would say, that I feel when I go to a place and things are different from what I expected before.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Well, according to Cambridge Dictionary, culture shock is a feeling of confusion felt by someone visiting a country or place they do not know. Another definition is that this confusion results from suddenly experiencing a culture with customs that are not familiar to you, which means it's not only about the point on the map per se. It's a normal process of adapting to a new lifestyle, a time when a person becomes aware of the differences in values and customs between their home culture and the new culture they're in. The common symptoms are usually described as the following: extreme homesickness, a feeling of helplessness or dependency, disorientation and isolation, depression and sadness, hyperirritability, sleep and eating disturbances. So guys, did you experience any of those symptoms while being here?
For most of them, not at all, except for sometimes homesickness, which happens like once every 2 weeks, but nothing more, and sometimes just sleep disturbances, but it was just at the beginning for the first 2 weeks. I went to sleep every day at 8 p.m., which is not at all my sleep schedule in France, but now it's kind of fixed, and I mean, I never slept any better since I'm here, so it's fixed now.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, I would say nothing too extreme, but I definitely felt some of the symptoms, especially in the beginning, like when you do your first trips to the supermarket or when you try to learn how to handle the everyday life in a new place. And yeah, I definitely felt a bit disoriented in the beginning, but I mean, gradually you get used to it and it's fine.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like, as for me, since I don't speak the language, I really felt helpless and dependent. And even in simple daily situations like ordering a taxi, communication with people can be quite tough. And it certainly causes frustration that you cannot perform easy daily actions. And it's like a vicious circle of helplessness and frustration. So yeah, thank you for sharing.
As we said, culture shock is a complex phenomenon with a lot of different symptoms. And according to those who studied it, it can be divided into 4 main stages. The first one is called the honeymoon stage, and is generally the first moment in which you go to a different place. And in that stage, you are full of inputs from the new reality that you just arrived to. You are not feeling homesick, and everything is new, everything is bright and shiny and beautiful, and you're curious about what you see, and you want to discover more. But gradually, these new elements start to get you a little upset, a little frustrated, a little disappointed, a little annoyed by like everyday tasks that normally are supposed to be easy because you know how to go to a supermarket, you know how to talk to people, but here they are not. So you try to find your products and you don't find them. You try to pay with the local currencies and you don't know the exchange. You try to speak to people and they don't understand you. And this gets you frustrated, and frustration is the second stage. Gradually, hopefully, you get adjusted to this new reality and you adapt to it in the third phase, that is the phase of adjustment and adaptation. And you start to get used to these new habits, and gradually you reach, hopefully, the final stage, which is the stage of acceptance, in which all these differences and all these new habits are now part of the way you live in this new place. And you even love those imperfections that we talked about in the beginning, because they make the place more interesting and more complex and deeper than it appeared in the beginning. So, Octave, what stage do you think you're in?
I'm still in a bit of everything, like between honeymoon, frustration, and adjustment. Because to be honest, I'm not in since enough time to say I'm in the acceptance part. I still manage too much with what is going on in my brain, but I still enjoy, but not like for the first weeks. I get frustrated when I can't exactly say what I want to say, but not as much as before, and I'm not perfectly adapted. Like, for the moment, I'm just enjoying, so it's okay, but still a culture shock.
And what about you, Olena?
Well, I've been living here for almost 10 months, so hopefully I'm in the stage of acceptance. And I can say that I've come to terms with the way things work here. Nevertheless, I still have some moments of adjustment because, as I said, I don't speak the language. And I believe that it's just a never-ending process of learning how to live in another country.
Yeah, I totally agree with what you just said. I would say that I'm also between the stage of adaptation and acceptance. I've also been living here for a long time. And I think that we never fully adapt to a new place, but we always go towards the acceptance stage. There's always something new to discover. There's always something to learn. And it's a process that goes on forever. And right, because of this, because of the fact that we always can learn something new and can change because of that, there is another phenomenon that is called reverse culture shock. That is something that people might experience after spending a long time abroad or in a different place. When they come back to their hometown or to the place that they used to live in before, the way this reverse culture shock happens is that you get so used to the new habits that you developed in the new place that when you come back, the old lifestyle seems a bit strange, seems a bit uncommon, because because you got used to something new, and because now you know that things can be done in a different way, and so you don't take your old habits for granted anymore. And you might feel a bit shocked also by that, but this is also something completely normal that can happen and can happen to anyone.
For some of us, it's the first time on this kind of projects. For me, I've never been that much without seeing my own town, even though I don't mind traveling and living my countryside. But among the three of us, I'm the one with the less experience in Romania and in an ESC project. Indeed, it's been just like 2 months since I'm here. Olena, can you tell us your experience about cultural shock in Romania?
Well, before coming here, I had an open mind to pretty much everything this project has to offer, and Romania as a country included. But there were some things that didn't necessarily shocked me, but they were quite surprising. For example, trains that tend to have quite long delays. But on the other hand, I, so to say, mastered the art of slow living. Another thing which was actually shocking was the bears. Because, for example, you can get a notification on your phone saying that you need to be careful because there is a bear in your area. And the way people drive here, they're very confident and fast. And a lot of people have cars. And another thing is that a lot of women drive cars, I think more than in Ukraine. And besides, tourism is thriving here. There are lots of castles, and the country is very varied regionally and has many attractive points for sightseeing. For example, you can find a magnificent fortified church almost in any village. But I would say that this experience made me also appreciate the things I have home, like my cheese, high quality of beauty services, and coffee places with coffee and cakes.
Thank you for sharing. Steffi, what do you want to add, if you have some?
Yeah, I mean, I can totally relate to a lot of things that Olena said. I can relate to what she said about the trains. I can relate to what she said about the drivers who are very confident in the way they move around in the streets. But I must say that here everyone stops when you try to cross a street in a city, which is something that I'm really not used to in Italy, and that surprised me in a very good way. Then there are also other like minor things that surprised me. For example, that in a lot of instances in houses you don't find curtains on windows, or the windows let pass a lot more light than I'm used to in Italy. So for the first months of this project, I had the sunlight reach my face very, very early in the morning, but eventually I got used to it. And other type of culture shocks that I experienced are also not because things were different, but because things were more similar than I expected them to be. For example, I found the Romanian language to be easier than I thought to understand. I don't really speak the language now, but when I read, I can understand a lot, and it's more similar to Italian than I expected. And another element regarding food is that I found out that one of the most typical dishes here is also one of the most typical dishes in my home region in Italy. We call it polenta. Here it's called mamaliga. And I didn't really know that before, and to find it here was something interesting because I've always associated it with my home region, and this surprised me, but in a very, very good way.
Thank you for sharing, Stefano. For me, I can't really say I have enough back thinking about getting the shock. I mean, I still don't realize the enormous shock, which should be, I guess, a part of getting in the adaptation part. But what I can say is that, for instance, one of the most shocking stuff I had was in 2019 when in high school I went to Sweden. And in Sweden they have like 6 or 7 meals a day, and that's what they call fika. And for me it was hard to come back in France, even though I went just for like 10 days, to get again an enormous meal as we're used to it. It was okay. Okay, now we're in a podcast called Castle Shock. So maybe we should talk as well about the shock with the people in the castle, so with the other volunteers. Olena, do you want to say some stuff about what's going on in the castle, like as a culture shock?
I come from a big city, Kharkiv, with its hectic energy. So it took me a while to adjust to people being very chill and relaxed and slow. And also to the fact that people are, I think, more emotional than what I'm used to.
For us, actually, I have to say that we have kind of a good mix of different stuff. Like, for example, we talked about the different eating schedule. So, like 2 weeks ago at the weekend, we had the most Spanish snacking agreement sharing cultural stuff because it was on a Sunday. We enjoyed in Romania a Thanksgiving dinner at 3 p.m. cooked by an American, with a homemade wine, which wasn't wine at all. I'm French. I really know what I'm talking about. And with salmale. But it was like the perfect mix. Like it was still a shock, but not a bad one.
So we have been talking about culture shock for a while now, but we need to ask ourselves a question, which is, why does culture shock happen? Where culture shock comes from? And the way we can answer this question is by saying that culture shock originates because we have expectations, because we have a preformed stereotype, an image in our mind that exists before we actually go to a place and kind of put it to the actual test of reality. So I want to ask you now, what was the stereotype that you had about Romania before coming here? What about you, Olena?
Well, unfortunately, I didn't know much. My image was just mountains and vegetation. Well, it is still true. I mean, the mountains are beautiful here, but the country is way more than just the mountains. And I didn't expect it to be that popular among tourists. And another thing, I think, people speak really good English. I didn't expect that.
And what about you, Octave?
So I'm going to start with a little disclaimer because, I mean, you can't ask your brain to not have expectations. You can't help the fact you always try to fight expectations, but that's kind of the part of stereotypes. I mean, you grew up with stereotypes, you grew up with different stuff. And, I mean, you can fight them with sharing cultures and traveling, etc. But, I mean, for me, I couldn't help but just thinking about the fact that as a Western European born, I still had the stereotypical idea that in the Eastern Europe was still kind of the Middle Age with like carts, snow, bears, castle. I mean, in Romania, we still have the bears and the castle, but I can't help having these thoughts about this. And I mean, and that's what you talked about with the culture shock, Stefano. Like you have different culture shock to fight. You have the one you fight with that you don't have the same lifestyle as you had when you're in your home country. And you also have the other culture shock, which is the one who fight what you really live in the country and what you thought about this country. Because that's also part of the culture shock, that you really fight with what you expected and what you really saw. So, yeah, that's all I have to say actually about my expectations in Romania, because I wasn't expecting that much.
So thank you, Octave. For me personally, I would say that we have a very big population of people from Romania or of Romanian origin in Italy. But unfortunately, we do not know that much about Romania. We do not talk that much about Romania in Italy because it kind of gets absorbed into a blob of stereotypes about Eastern Europe more in general. And so I must say that having been here and having spent a lot of months here has been a very, very interesting experience. Also to go beyond the stereotypes and to discover more and to get shocked, but in a positive way, by the encounters with the new culture and with the different people. And if you also want to experience something like this, I really recommend trying this experience because it's really interesting and it will surprise you in a very good way.
Okay, so this is the end of the podcast named Castle Culture Shock. Stay tuned on the YouTube channel of Asociația Aum, because you have still other podcasts to listen to. Another one on the same topic is coming, which is called Living in Another Country. Don't forget, if you want to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. And, well, see you in another podcast.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.